now we talked about the adults, and this is interesting for children. We're looking at childhood obesity. There isn't that much data on children. There is some, but there really needs to be more studies looking at childhood obesity in Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander groups. But luckily, we are in California, so we have some of this data, which I think is incredible when you look at these populations. And if you look at for childhood obesity among children in California, they have what's called the healthy fitness zones to evaluate whether a student meets the healthy fitness zone goals, like a physical activity and body composition. So they'll have them do certain exercises. They'll have them run to measure and assess this index, this HFZ index. And what they found out is that out of all the students that were assessed, the Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, they had the highest proportion of fifth graders whose body mass index are not in the healthy fitness zone. And they also found out that with Samoans and other Pacific Islanders, they had the highest rates across all the racial ethnic groups. So I know we talk about, and there are health disparities with many, that's why this class is on various diverse groups, right? We talked about Latinos. They definitely have issues and with higher rates of body mass index and obesity, but you can see that Native Hawaiians are very high, and other Pacific Islander children are at risk for obesity and early onset of diabetes at a younger age. And they also found that Guamanian, Native Hawaiian, and Tahitian Californians also report higher rates of fifth graders whose BMI are not in the healthy fitness zone compared to the state average. So when you're comparing those groups versus everyone else, okay? So basically indicating that there's definitely, they're at risk of higher obesity. They have higher BMI compared to the other children and other ethnic groups. Okay, great. So I wanted to point out, this is the study that we did on dietary attitudes and belief study, and Dr. McMillan had talked about some of the, what they thought was a healthy Hawaiian. So this is some of the demographics. And I think you have the manuscript on this for this, from this study. And so basically, about 60% were female, 40% were male. And this is surprising, but majority of them didn't smoke. But that's because our average age was higher. Our average age in this population was about 60 years old. So maybe by then they knew better. They weren't smoking. Right, so they knew better. So this is different, but that was our group that we have in Southern California. So maybe it is a distinction than what we have off island versus on island. So, and then they all had some sort of college education. Okay, so that was the demographics.
Which, can I just add, is
Sure.
a reason a lot of Pacific Islanders leave the islands and come here to get their college education. So it's another reason for migration.
Yeah. So, and so in our sample in Southern California, we also found that actually 51% of them had some sort of chronic disease. So half of them, either they had high cholesterol, they had hypertension, they had diabetes. So you can see that there is a need in the community, the chronic disease. We looked at overweight, that should be the next slide, the cardiometabolic disease. So 74% said yes to having cardiometabolic disease. So either high cholesterol, diabetes, high triglycerides, hypertension, all within the definition of having cardiometabolic disease. Okay? And then overweight and obesity, so you can see that 90%, over 90% were either overweight or obese. But we do have to consider, this is according to the body mass index of what we use here in the United States. So it is a little bit skewed. And when we look at the data for looking at BMI for Pacific Islanders, it's obviously not as high as what we see here. Okay?
And this was also, we did the scales,
Yes.
the height and weight, so there was
Exactly.
no.
Yeah, we actually used, we had them, we used scales. It wasn't self-reported data. We actually had them stand up against the wall and do their height. And we had this scales where they came in and did their measurement. So we'll go on to objective 3 and 4. I actually love this saying, and Kaala has this at the end of her emails, that says that no work is too large when done by all. So we all contributed and worked together on this study, and we'll go ahead and talk about and familiarize view to the Pacific Islander diet and their needs, as well as discuss the social determinants and cultural context for that diet. Okay. So let's talk about, see, what are we eating? What are Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders eating? What are the major studies out there? Now, for you, to go through and do your paper, you need some references. You need to have evidence-based, you need to have research-based studies to look and see and look at the diet. So I'm going to give you some of those references that you can look at if you're interested in doing a project on it. If you're looking at interested, you need to have the peer-reviewed studies. So one of the original peer-reviewed studies was the Waianae Diet Program. It incorporated traditional Hawaiian values with looking at traditional Hawaiian diet, which Ta'ala talked about, taro and poi, and the ways of cooking was boiling or steaming. So, and I went to this video, the State Line video actually shows you a really great overview of this diet. So I wanted to show it to you.
In Studio 3B in Rockefeller Center, here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. This is the time of year when we're usually the most weight conscious. Most of us put on a few pounds over the holidays, and come January, we get serious about getting our eating habits back on track. Some of us want to lose weight because of the way we look, some because of how we feel, still others because being overweight is dangerous to your health. Just how dangerous is open to debate. Since 2 weeks ago, the biggest study ever done on obesity found that it's not as likely to lead to premature death as doctors had believed. Whatever your motivation for trying to eat healthier, there's a new eating plan that some doctors say is good for you. It's based on the native foods of Hawaii, but you don't have to go to Hawaii to follow it, although it couldn't hurt. Here's Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Bob Arnott.
Ah, Hawaii, enchanted islands of surf, sun, and the birthplace of a rediscovered diet that could be the key to losing weight and living in better health. It's working for Hawaiians. It could do the same for you. Dr. Terry Shintani is one of the most enthusiastic advocates of this weight plan that's best known as the Hawaii diet.
We're not trying to promote a one-time quick fix diet. We're trying to get people to adopt a healthy lifestyle that they can stay with for a long time.
Diet may be a four-letter word, but this healthy lifestyle is one that many people are happy to adopt. By following the Hawaii diet, people find a rapid improvement in blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol. But that's not the best part. People say they can eat all they want. That's right, all they want and still lose weight.
Eat more to weigh less sounds like a snake oil salesman's line. How could it possibly be true?
When people follow our recommendations, they actually wind up eating more food in terms of the weight of the food, but they wind up eating less calories. And so what happens is people eat until they're satisfied, and the weight keeps coming off until they reach their ideal body weight. It's just basic science.
Simply put, the diet is based on traditional or whole foods. Whole grains, fruits, vegetables, foods high in fiber, low in calories, and filled with nutrition. No red meat, no cheese or other dairy products, and very little fat.
If you follow the diet, you really can eat as much as you want. Watch this. Here's a typical American meal with French fries, cheeseburger, and milkshake. That's over 1,300 calories and nearly 60 grams of fat. Here, however, is a typical Hawaiian meal with taro root, sweet potato, tomato, greens, banana, papaya, fish, and poi. That's a huge meal that could fill almost anyone for hours, yet it's 450 fewer calories and only 8 grams of fat.
The ancient Hawaii diet derives its name from its origins, native Hawaiian foods. The staple of the traditional diet was the taro plant. The leaves can be eaten like a salad, the root baked like a potato, or pounded into a low-fat, high-fiber food called poi. On this diet, native Hawaiians remain lean and strong. And while this is the image many of us still have of native Hawaiians, this is the reality. Unlike their ancestors, 2 out of 3 native Hawaiians today are medically obese. They've adopted a high-fat, high-calorie diet, and with it, far higher rates of heart disease and cancer than the average American. Mary Villa is half native Hawaiian, just 5'4" tall. Until a few years ago, she weighed 206 pounds and suffered from weight-related diabetes.
If I never changed my lifestyle, I would say I'd be at least about 100, 250 pounds and sickly, very sickly.
When you used to go out to fast food restaurants, what were the favorite foods that you ate there?
Hot dogs, hamburger and gravy, macaroni salad, rice, Spam.
So you considered balanced nutrition a hot dog, Spam, and macaroni.
Yeah.
And what happened to you?
I got bigger and I got sicker and I didn't get well.
When Mary's mother died of complications from diabetes, she decided it was time for a change and turned to Dr. Shintani's diet program. For 3 weeks, Mary and the other dieters ate prepared Hawaiian meals and learned how to cook healthy at home. Now, instead of processed hot dogs and Spam, Mary and her family bake natural taro root and sweet potatoes. Instead of frying hamburgers, they wrap chicken in taro leaves and steam it. For Mary, willpower came from reconnecting with her ancient culture.
When I went on the diet, I learned the type of people we were and from where we came from. And I was proud to understand that if I ate this way a long time ago, I wouldn't have been sick.
And Mary was very sick. Before the diet, her diabetes was so severe, she had to inject herself with insulin twice a day. Now, thanks to the Hawaii diet, she doesn't need to inject the drug at all. But the biggest surprise was how quickly that happened.
How soon after you began the Hawaiian diet did you stop taking insulin altogether?
It was my second week on the diet.
You're kidding.
No, it was.
2 weeks out.
2 weeks on the diet.
We've done that with even worse cases, with people who had even more insulin.
Dr. Shintani published the results of his diet in the respected American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. In his study, the average dieter lost 17 pounds. Cholesterol counts dropped 14%. Blood pressure and blood sugar improved as well, all in just 3 weeks.
But if you don't want to eat taro, don't worry. Dr. Shintani says the traditional Hawaii diet can be modified to suit almost any palate. Now a multicultural version of the diet is catching on across Hawaii, reaching all the way to the governor's office.
I used to love Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't eat that anymore.
Last January, Hawaii Governor Benjamin Cayetano and several members of his cabinet went on the multicultural version of the Hawaii diet. Dieters ate brown rice instead of poi. They substituted broccoli and other vegetables for taro leaves. Governor Cayetano, who is of Filipino descent, lost 12 pounds, and his cholesterol dropped an astonishing 70+ points.
I was very pleased, but very, very surprised. And for me, it really brought home the value of nutrition.
I used to have a lot of headaches, and I felt stressed out at times. And I always thought it was job-related.
Charles Taguchi is the governor's chief of staff. While he didn't need to lose weight, he did need medication for high blood pressure. Within 10 days of starting the diet, his doctor said his blood pressure had improved so much he could stop taking the drugs.
I have a lot more energy. I look forward to getting up in the morning. I do some running in the evening, and so I feel good.
As Dr. Shintani and I walked near Mount Ka'ala, ancient planting grounds of taro fields, he stressed the results can be real for anyone willing to make the changes.
If you continue to eat a junk food diet, you will continue to have a high risk of heart disease, high risk of cancer, high risk of stroke, unless you do something. People have to make their own choices. People can choose to be sick, and people can choose to be healthy.
Whether you live on a tropical Hawaiian island or a crowded urban one, Dr. Shintani says you can adopt the Hawaii diet as your own. Not only will you feel better, but many people, including Mary, say the food tastes better too.
Honestly, would you rather have a hamburger and French fries or poi and taro, traditional Hawaiian foods?
I would rather have my poi and taro.
Dr. Shintani says anyone considering a radical change in diet or changing their medications should talk to their doctor first. Sample menus and recipes from the Hawaii diet can be found on our website.
So that was a great, so what are some takeaways you think that you took away from that? And maybe bring it back to some of your nutrition class and what we learned in the nutrition class. So what would you say about the traditional Hawaiian diet? In terms of, let's say, vegetable intake versus fruit intake versus the westernized diet?
I think it's really obvious that it's always whole food based, any like indigenous group or any population. You know, if you go back to really our roots and just pick up from there and incorporate what we used to eat, which is like no packaged foods, and you know we have to really take time out for our food. So
That's a great point. Yeah, exactly. Package, process. It's almost if we and you did do a log. Remember doing a log for your nutrition class, doing the 3-day, and you look and see that really we are eating so much processed food and packaged foods, and there is hardly most of us are not getting that in our busy lifestyle. We'll talk about that what are some of the barriers. And Dr. Weiss talked about some of the psychosocial factors that go along with those barriers of eating healthful, eating a high fiber, high vegetable, high fruit diet. So that was, I think that, so if you're looking on PubMed, looking at doing some searches, you look at the Hawaiian diet, rather than the traditional Hawaiian diet, to give you some background information on the traditional Hawaiian diet. So that is a great diet, and what they found out, it does work, but for some people it was harder to kind of follow through now, because Hawaii has changed so much, and I think the cultures have changed so much. So since then, what they've added to it is the diet is great, the preparation method is great, but they were delivering a lot of the meals, and that kind of didn't work because you have to maintain it. It is actually, it's still an excellent way of pursuing healthful eating and losing weight. But what they've gone ahead and done is also come up with the Pili Ohana project, which Ka'ala had discussed. And what Pili does is it does take into account the different changes that have gone on in Hawaii since then, the different cultures that have come on, and they've also included different ways of physical activity. Here are some ways of walking, and they've provided some more guidance on how to increase the vegetable intake, increase fruit intake, increase fiber, reduce percent energy from fat. So that you can also go on, when you go on PubMed to read further about it, the Pili Ohana project, you just even type in Pili and it'll come up with their first baseline data results that they have. And they actually have results, the pilot study results now, that show that those that were on this intervention actually did lose weight. And actually some of their health actually improved as well. So I wanted to put that. And the other studies that are out that are looking at major studies on nutrition and diet in Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders is on the multi-ethnic cohort study. How many of you have heard about the multi-ethnic cohort study? Okay. So this is a great study. I mean, you know, and we point these out because if you throw a dart and you look at all the articles in PubMed and you look at population-based studies, you're mostly going to find it in which group? What do you think? What group, if you're doing research, what ethnic group would you find it in? Where would you find these types of studies done in? What ethnic, let's say diet, if you're looking at diet and healthy eating, what types of ethnic groups would you find majority of the papers? Yeah, exactly. Non-Hispanic whites, there's Latinos. So that's why I wanted to point out that here are some resources that you could go to and look at the multi-ethnic cohort study. It's a really good resource. It's a study looking at 5 different ethnic groups, and it's a consortium between Hawaii and California, looking at diet, all sorts of diet. You can look at percentage from fat, potassium. You can look at macro and micronutrients. So that's a good resource. The only thing about this study is that the majority of the Hawaiians there are from Hawaii, and they're not from Southern California. So that's when we actually pursue the diet, attitudes, and belief study to give you that population, that looking at the differences. So the references are here too, so you can go ahead and look some of those up. So, and I wanted to point out that what about those in Southern California? What about the Native Hawaiians in Southern California? What are they eating? And what we found is that the mean whole grain servings was 1.63, and the daily recommended allowance was 4.5. We also found that the refined grains were higher, so those coming from, as you can, refined grains are from what? Like white breads, right? All the white foods, that's where you find the refined grains. And the vegetable servings was okay, 2.5 servings, but we still not reaching up to the 5 servings. The fruit serving was at 2, and we're still not reaching up to the 5 servings of fruits that are recommended. The fiber is, the American, even though they're not reaching the recommended amount, the fiber is about 16 to 17 grams per day. So even if this population wasn't reaching the recommended amount, in the United States, the average is between 11 to 13. So they're still doing better. And so the mono fat, saturated fat, that's pretty good at 13%. Poly is at 7, saturated is at 11. You want to try to be at less than 10. And the total is at 34% energy from fat. So where you want to be at 30%. So this gives you an idea. And okay, bear with me on the next slide. Don't grumble. There's a lot of numbers. Don't cry back there, please. Right. So this is a lot of numbers, but it's here for you as a reference if you want to look at it further. This is, and it's published in the manuscript, in the HMJ manuscript. And what you can see here, this lets you see the mean for the food intake. That's the mean. The energy intake is at 1,882 for overall, and that's the range. And then the percent energy from fat is at 33, 34%, and those that are above the guideline of 30% is 24%. So you can go through here and look at the charts, like vegetable is easy, right? 2.9 servings, and about 14% are above the guideline of 5, right? 5 servings of fruit and vegetable. So if you can go through it and look at, this is the males, this is the females. Of course, our sample size was smallish, but we're working with what I talked about with special populations. So we have the data. We did find significant differences, and it was accepted in the peer-reviewed publication. So just go back and look at it. Do you have any questions about it right now? I know there's quite a few numbers on here. So you can go back and look and see the comparison, see who's above the guidelines, and how many are below the guidelines. Okay. So this one here, this chart here too, represents, actually I wanted to point out, we talked about this, the last lecture on looking at Asians versus Pacific Islanders. Now can everyone squint and see? Let's look at this here. We're looking at the unadjusted odds ratio here, and the adjusted, okay, let's look at the adjusted, that's what we want to look at. You know, you want to adjust for different factors that are associated with, for example, age and sex and place of residence. You want to look at the adjusted odds ratio. So if we're looking at the adjusted odds ratio, so what they're doing here is they're comparing Pacific Islanders relative to Asian Americans, right? So an odds ratio above 1 is what? Are you at increased risk? Are you at no risk? Are you at reduced risk? You're at increased risk, right? So when we look at the odds ratio, for smoking, are Pacific Islanders at higher risk compared to Asian Americans for smoking, or lower risk? Higher risk, exactly. So Pacific Islanders are 2.64 times at higher risk than Asian Americans for smoking. How about for overweight and obesity? Are they at higher risk or lower? Higher. They're twice as likely. Having alcohol intake, nearly 4 times as likely than Asian Americans. So if you look at across every risk factor, they're virtually higher on everything, okay? For risk factor in terms of, you know, alcohol intake, overweight. They are more physically active, and I showed you that data, that it's kind of a paradox, that they are physically active. They do eat well, they like to do more of everything, I guess, right? So, but at the same time, the behaviors do put them at greater risk for diabetes, for cancer, for heart disease. So this is to point out the point that we made previously, that should Native Hawaiians be lumped in with Asian Americans? So what do you think from this data? Right, they shouldn't, I mean, they really are a separate group and separate different behaviors, and we talked about the different cultural aspects. So this is what this table points out. So how is it? Is it okay? I know there's a lot of numbers on there, but do you see the point that I'm trying to make there? That if you look at the odds ratio, that they're higher. And the next one, if you look at it compared to whites, what's the odds ratio? What do you think? Are they more similar to non-Hispanic whites versus Asians? If you look at these numbers, look at the odds ratios adjusted here. 1.14, 0.9, 0.8, 0.84. So what do you think? They're more similar. Somebody's awake. Thank you. Oh, everyone's awake. Okay. So you see that they're more similar. So that's why how you use everything you learn, right? The nutrition, epidemiology, research methods courses to let you see the differences and disparities in these groups. Okay, so we've gone through some of the numbers, lots of text, which is great. So I wanted to pass it over to Julia.
I always get the easy part.
The fun part.
Yeah. So after she collected all that quantitative data, like I said, the anthropologist always gets to just talk with people. What are you doing? Their favorite joke, Hawaiians don't eat until they're full. They eat until they're tired. So as Archana was saying, a lot of everything. So when I spoke with them about the different kinds of eating habits, there was a lot of joking going on, joking about portion size, between having the palm full versus a couple handfuls of the food. And the joking, though, was contextualized within different historical ideas. One is the idea that it's disrespectful not to eat what's given to you, not to eat what's on your plate. Like Auntie said, you come into someone's house and you offer them food to eat. It's disrespectful to turn away the food, right? So if someone's offering you lots of food, you're going to eat it. And sometimes you keep on eating, right? They also expect at different social events for there to be lots of food. When I was in the field, I remember someone was complaining about non-Hawaiians going to parties, and they're saying, they always come, but they never bring enough to share with everyone, right? You need to bring enough for yourself and enough to share with everyone, and that's how they know. That's how everyone knows that you're Hawaiian, because you're feeding, you're caring for them, they're caring for you, right? So a lot of the sociality, a lot of the ways that you get to know people and become their friends and come to care about them is through food and sharing food. And this happens at a lot of Pacific Islander events. Like if you don't see a lot of food, you kind of don't want to stay. So you're going to go somewhere else. A lot of times the expectation of food too is that they're foods from home. They're the taro and the laulau and all these delicious foods that they don't get to have all the time, so they'll go to the events and buy lots of food and hopefully put in the freezer, but sometimes you end up eating it all too. So there's this expectation of having good food at the events and sharing it with everyone and eating a lot. There are also generational issues. A lot of the elder folk spoke to us about growing up in Depression era and remembering not having enough food to get a hold of. And so, having access to food was such a luxury. Being able to show now that you had lots of access to food was a sign, a symbol of achievement, right? That you weren't struggling anymore. Same goes with the poverty. And then the third piece that a lot of people talked to us about was talking to other family members who were having medical issues, who may be overweight. And a lot of them said that it's just really hard to preach to them. You know, how do you tell your uncle, your elder, especially with issues of respect, or even your child, you know, don't eat so much, you're gaining too much weight. You know, stop doing that when they may go around the corner and keep on eating more, or go to their friend's house and be offered more food. Right, so how do you start preaching it to them? And it's sort of this idea that you shouldn't be scolding other people, especially your elders, right, and telling them what to do. So there's this complex, you know, kind of intersection between the generation, between preaching to each other, and between, you know, what's being offered at gatherings for Pacific Islanders. Some of the social determinants of health. So you guys have talked about social determinants of health. What are some of the things that have been brought up in your previous discussions? I wasn't here, so you have to fill me in. What's a gossip?
About the socio-ecological model, we've talked about social context. So now what we're getting into more is that we've talked about these health disparities. So it's about healthful eating, but it's not. We know. Juliet told you. We talked about it. We talked about that. The community understands. They know their health issues. They know what would be helpful to eat. Of course, getting more detailed information, specific recipes, specific plans and regimens, I think, are very helpful. But in addition to that, you have this whole other social context, the ecological model that you had originally talked about. So that's
Is that what you guys reviewed?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we do that. So what are some of the things other than just knowing that this is what we should eat and knowing that it should be more plant-based diet? What are some of the issues that come into play?
I think one of the biggest issues is the way the society is here in California. I feel like it's really fast-paced. When it comes to being culturally rooted, it's difficult when my mom isn't able to have access, or it wasn't always taught like, oh, this is how you make and prepare the food. For example, when I saw the chicken being put in the leaf of the, I think it was a taro leaf, I was surprised. I was like, oh, you can cook chicken like that? Because these are things that my mom wasn't taught or I don't know about. But like I wondered if, because my dad's actually trying to grow bananas in the backyard. So we've had success before when we lived in the other house, and I wondered like, oh, would it be possible to even cook like chicken in a banana leaf, since they make I think, well, they're tamales, so we use like banana leaves or like corn leaves, and like that's another way of cooking food that I didn't know about. So I think also knowing how to cook the food and having the time to learn about it.
Right, having the access to the resources and the knowledge of what to do.
Yeah.
Good, good. Right.
Yeah. That's great.
So, yeah, no, that's a great example. And actually, we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Some of the determinants of health for Pacific Islanders, we've talked a bit about the migration issues. So people coming from other islands. We'll watch a little video from George and Greta Briand, who are Marshallese, from the Marshallese community here, and they talk about the atomic bomb testing and what that means to them. But in terms of accessing different foods and having proper foods to eat, there are a lot of fundraisers that Pacific Islanders engage in order to raise money to send back home. So they'll have a lot of festivals to buy computers for the school back in Tonga, or they'll have festivals to get money for the church back home, or they'll have fundraisers for different people's birthdays. There's all sorts of events that go on, and part of what happens is that people are spending some of their money, and they're working hard, and they're spending their money on these events. So it starts to get in the way of actually having time and having resources to get some other daily needs in terms of healthy foods, in terms of being able to cook those healthy foods. And so if you look at the research by Craig Janes, he looked at Samoan communities, And he followed families that had migrated from what then was Western Samoa and is now independent Samoa to American Samoa, and then finally to California. And he found that some of these events were part of the things that led to unhealthy behaviors here in California. And as he was going through each spot, the further you got away from their original home island, the larger the people got. So moving from independent Samoa to American Samoa, people got bigger because there was more access to fast food in American Samoa. There were other pressures where they weren't really growing their own food in American Samoa, where they did in independent Samoa on their own land. And then when they got here, there was even more access to fast food and more pressures to earn money and more pressures to give money to the community. So his work is really interesting in showing that trajectory, that the farther you get away, because of this idea that people aren't being able to have access to the healthy foods, to be able to work in their gardens, to be able to grow their food. You saw in a lot of the videos, people were digging and pounding that poi, you know, is a really physical activity. But when you don't have to do that anymore, things shift, right? Things in your body shift around, they get bigger, right? And your cholesterol levels and your sugar levels all go up. So this was a really interesting study to see him do that. And then there are also all sorts of various political relationships that Pacific Islanders have with the United States. So for instance, you know, Hawaii was overthrown by the US military. So there's a whole push for Native Hawaiian sovereignty. And what does that mean in terms of getting access to land? What does that mean in terms of being able to have a healthy diet? So you see a lot of people wanting to go back to the Native Hawaiian diet. But how do you do that? Well, you have to have access to the land in order to grow the taro, in order to grow the food, in order to even go gather the foods that you want and need to eat, right? So there's that political issue. And sometimes, you know, as you're thinking about how does that carry over to California, to the populations here, this issue of sovereignty and being able to grow your own food. There's also the issue that Auntie brought up about the Marshallese and the nuclear testing that happened. And when the Marshallese get here, how are they to access health care? So Holly Barker recently did a study where she followed the Marshallese communities, and the issue with the Tyson, Marshallese working in the Tyson farms is interesting because it is one of the sort of first cases where you get access to health insurance. But people who are not working in those kind of jobs, and because of the nuclear testing, have high rates of cancer. Generations are having high rates of cancer. Where are they getting their medical care? So they come here, they can only be on state medical care for a few months, 6 months, so they start their treatment and then it runs out. So they go to another state, they'll go to Washington and they get some treatment there and then it runs out. They go to their family in Nevada, they get some treatment there and it runs out. They come back to California. So can you imagine trying to follow a population that is always moving like that, whose access to care is always being thwarted in different ways? How do you know, we all say that in order to have good health, you need continuity of care, right? And here's a case where there's no way to achieve continuity in care, right? So there's different political relationships. Tongans, so that's the Marshallese. Samoans, it depends whether you come from independent Samoa or American Samoa. American Samoa is a territory. You can come over to the United States and work and live. Same with the Chamorro. There's a large population of Chamorro down in San Diego because a lot of them worked in the military, right? So they retired down in San Diego. Tonga, there's no political relationships. So there's a combination of people who come here with papers and also a combination of people who come without papers. So some of their health issues and their access to care are very similar to some of our Mexican migrants, right? In dealing with regular care, in dealing with work. A lot of people work in service industry for the Tongans. Right, so there's a whole host when we talk about Pacific Islanders. You can't just throw them in with Asian Americans, and you can't just throw them all together either, because the determinants, the social determinants of health, how they access care, varies by their political relationships with the United States. So, yeah. So what's interesting about this video is part of a project that I've been working on with Kristen Marquez, who's a videographer, and Ka'ala and Kaivi Peng, where we were collecting stories from elders in the community about how they built up the community. And this video is from George and Greta Briand, Marshallese, and they start off with a memory of food, right? What it meant to have certain foods. So, I don't know where to stand.
What is, oh man, it's so good I cannot explain it.
It looks like a celery. It looks like a celery, you know.
They grew up.
This grew up from the ground, and you have to dig it out, grind it, and then you scrape it, and it's become like a powder.
You mix it with, coconut milk, put sugar in it.
And eat it, or just like a soup. It's really good.
I don't know, I'm trying to look for it, think of any other food that tastes like it is.
Yeah, okay. My name is George Brian. Well, I born on April right there, and I met my wife from Mesro. She came from Liguia to Mesro, and I came from Mano to Mesro. And all these things here are current and waves. I've been here for a long time, and I'm also a pastor of a small church called Marshallese Christian Center here in Costa Mesa.
And my name is Greta Bryan. I'm also from the Marshall Islands, but I was born in Liguia, went to Mesro, and came here to attend Vanguard University.
I know some of the US citizens will be somewhere, they say, how come you guys live a beautiful island, but they don't know the story? Yeah, they are beautiful, but they cannot, island cannot provide what is our physical needs are.
From 47 all the way to 58, they were practicing over there.
If they are home, if they stay there is nothing. Even we used to live on our land. We grow our food, vegetable, pig and chicken. But right now, because of the thing that is happening all over the island.
You know what happened to our island when they came in, just nude us. Now people are having so many different kind of problems.
The radiation that affect all the island, and one of the reasons why we come to the United States.
We mentioned earlier about the mugwort. We can't even grow it anymore because of the radiation in the land, and none of them we can't even grow that anymore. We know because we were told that it was, the bomb that was dropped there, it was like 1,000 stronger than what they did in Hiroshima. And they told us, okay, you might not have the cancer, but maybe the grandkids might have something else that we don't even know anything about now. So it's hard, when you think about it, you look at your grandkids and you say, okay, I won't be here, but what will happen to them? Sorry.
Most of the people in our community, they die of cancer. from other kind of disease, but from cancer.
So, you know, that's, we mentioned earlier that we came here to look for a job, and even some of them come here to go to school. Because, you know, that's the only way. If they don't have education here, how can you support the family? We're allowed to come in here, we just, our passport, and then they give us an I-94 in standard. But these are, it's not required for us to have a visa. So we're allowed to stay here as long as we behave ourselves. It's very hard for us. I mean, you work here for so many years, you're at the hospital and all that, they always say, oh, we cannot help you because you're not citizen. And then you start to scratch your head and say, hey, I pay to the system, and how come I'm not allowed, you know, just because I don't, you know. So that's one of the things that we're working with all the other islanders, all the Pacific Islanders, let them know that, hey, they're allowed to work here, they're allowed to stay here, you know. That's them. But we're not lazy people. I mean, we like to work. I went to one of the workshops on cancer, and I know sometimes they mention that, okay, even radiation help cure cancer. But then I guess if it's too much, that's not even good. You know, there was one doctor I met in one of the workshops, and I was just asking her, I said, you mentioned something about radiation. I was exposed at that time to it. And she also mentioned to me that, hey, if you're my patient, I check you every 6 months. So it's always good that all these help that Pacific is bringing to us and connecting to others, at least something that we didn't even know before, because of the connection we have and part of Pacific Health Partnership. It kind of helps us so we can take what we learn and bring it to our community and say, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you get set in your breast. This is how you do this. This is, if something happens, let us know so we can take you to, you know, to the doctor.
So, I love that video. I think their talk is just so touching. Oh yeah, we put 2 videos together. What did you guys think of her story? How would you, if you were to be working in the community, how would you approach this kind of issue? Any thoughts?
Things that when we're talking about and looking at diet, when we're talking about obesity, can you see that there are other issues? And that's why we base it on looking at the social context. So how would you address it? I mean, can you see the other factors that might play into their lives, that might play into their everyday living? What are some things that she talked about that you could see, oh, that might affect her health? So if it affects her health, it's going to affect the way she cares for her, not that in a bad way, but it may impact how well or how thoroughly she could be able to work and take care of the kids, the family, and food and eating. So can you think about that? What are some factors that she discussed?
How they don't have access to health care.
That's a great one.
Right. I mean, in thinking about being able to understand what the issue is for each of those communities and having ready the kind of paperwork or the kind of information that they might need in order to make sure that they get the care. And that's, you know, why PIP is so wonderful, is that they start, you know, providing that kind of information so that people can get the care. Right? So it's not just about talking about the diet, but it's about being able to provide this other really important information that helps get them through the medical system, right? Especially in these times of need. Yeah.
So this actually is talking about the change in the Hawaiian population. So when you look and see, if you look and see in Hawaii, and so I know we talked about things that are in the continental United States, but just lets you see that primarily the population was Hawaiian. So what's happened from then on? What happens here? You have an increase, an influx in other populations, right? You have the Portuguese, you have the Japanese, the Chinese, the American British. So not only is there an influx of cultural issues that are going on in Hawaii, and lifestyle and diet, and not only those, but there's all these political issues that we've been talking about, that where in terms of control, who's in control of the businesses, who's in control of the government, who's in control of the society. So those political issues come into play when you are talking about looking at a person's lifestyle, whether you're talking about that whole macrocosm does affect the individual's microcosm and how they lead their lifestyle. So we wanted to point that out in looking at the change. And so when you look at the change, you see that we're going to have some of these really healthful, delicious foods, right? That we originally started out with this. Let's look at this, the dark green leafy. You have the lau lau, and then you have the poke, lomi lomi salmon, right? So you have more of the healthful foods that we started with this. But when we talk about acculturation and migration, we went from this to what we think now is the traditional Hawaiian diet. Which, if you look at here, what do we have here? Do you see anything green on here? No, there's nothing green. There's nothing here high in fiber. There's nothing here high in vegetable fruit or any sort of micro or macronutrients. And in fact, when you look at the percent energy from fat, today the Native Hawaiian diet is nearly 40% energy from fat. Whereas here, before, it was traditionally up to 10% energy from fat, what I had said previously. So it's actually a quite change that occurred in that population for Native Hawaiians. Okay. So this goes back to, again,
So Archana was showing you some of the transitions, of going from a healthy food into a diet of high fat. And some of the other transitions that they have leaving Hawaii, the group that we talk to, a lot of times people will come here for a better job, better pay, right, bigger house. This idea of the American dream, a lot of people told us that, they would be able to have more. A lot of people that we talked to, and even the video that I showed you, there are a lot of people that said that they came here, they brought their kids here because they wanted them to have more. They wanted them to have more education. They wanted to have a bigger house. They wanted them not to have to work so hard. But a lot of the family members are working, multiple jobs to make ends meet. But they were really looking for a change of life for their youth. And so you can think about childhood obesity and what does it mean when the parents are working multiple jobs to make ends meet, that they're trying to make life better for their kids and they're offering them more things in order to do that. A lot of the younger people, when they leave islands, they'll come because they want to, of course, experience living away from home. A lot of you, maybe you moved out of your parents' house to come to college, right? Because you wanted to be away from home. And then a lot of people also came for college, getting a higher education. And when they come here for college, they always have the intention of going back home. To come here, get your degree, go back home, right? And so many people told me, that they spent the majority of their time now, 20 years, here in California, just trying to get back home. So once they get here, they get established, they have kids, they buy a home, and can't seem to go back to the island where, they really have this memory of having more there. So anyway, that's the reason a lot of people come. When they are here, the things that they told us that make it really stressful to be here, a lot of times people would compare, living Hawaii to living here, and having this vision of living in Hawaii as just easier. So for example, if you worked a 40-hour week, after you worked your shift, you could just go out to the beach. I mean, the beaches are right there. You could go around and walk in the parks. You could do whatever you want. That was the image of what a lot of people had thinking back home. So they thought being here was so much more stressful, that they're working longer hours. There's less to do after they work. They're spending hours on the freeway commuting. So by the time they get home, they just want to be home. They don't want to go anywhere else. Sometimes they don't even want to cook, right? So you get the fast food and different dietary issues along with that. So they just want to stay home with their family and not go out. And even thinking about going to the beach. We're in California, we're sort of close, but if you consider the time that it takes to get there, you know, even that sometimes after working so many hours is really complicated. So, you know, they're not going to the beach as often as they would, or as often as they imagine their counterparts in Hawaii going to the beach. And then other people were also concerned about the safety of the environment. So to consider walking, you know, going outside after work for a day and taking a walk around the block was not an option for some people. They felt unsafe in the area, or that there was no specific place to walk to. Right? Do you just walk around? Or wouldn't it be better if they could just walk to a grocery store and get healthy food and then walk back? But that's not the way our environment is structured. Right? So if you live in an area where it's sort of safe to walk, you could think of a lot of our gated community, there's, you know, you could walk around, but there's nowhere to walk to. Right? Or other areas where maybe you could walk to the drugstore. Have you guys learned about food deserts and all that? Did you talk about that? Anyway, you could walk to the liquor store, but there's no healthy food, right? So there's an assortment of things that happen in terms of the stressful environments. When they're talking about how to start changing to help get our okole going, what do you guys think okole means? To help get our okole going. Any idea? What would you tell your friends if you wanted them to go get up and exercise? Get your butt going. Exactly. Get your okole going, right? So get your butt going. There was a lot of focus on the social versus kind of individual behaviors. As you saw on the last slide, a lot of the parents were really burdened by the workload, by the commuting, by the stresses of living in California. But when it came to their kids, they would often say, if you want us to get out and go out in the community and do activities, you need to target it to our kids, because wherever our kids are going, that's where we will go, right? And even the grandparents will go as well. And so focusing on larger social events, focusing on the kids, for them, they thought this was one of the key ways to change behavior, to start moving towards a healthier community. Along with that, so focusing on the kids, focusing on issues of access and the environment and healthy spaces, I talked about that as well. But also there was this real concern about where you can get Hawaiian food. So Ka'ala showed us a lot of the Hawaiian foods. You saw the video, a lot of the healthy Hawaiian foods that you can get. But when you think about that in terms of getting those foods in California, where do you get them? Sometimes you can get them at Ranch 99, sometimes you cannot. Now there's Marukai markets, sometimes you can get the foods there, sometimes you cannot. But a lot of them, you know, we're saying, I've lived here for decades, and I still don't know where I can get taro. I still don't know where I could get poi. So if I wanted to engage in a healthy environment or a healthy diet, where would I go? The other piece of accessing foods is this idea of sharing food. So remember I said, when you go to the festivals, people are always expecting lots and lots of food. But you can't take it all home. So figuring out ways to share food, to have community gardens, to have food banks where the elders can get food or where singles can get food, right? If people are making lots of food, is there a way that we can share that? So those were some of the ideas that the community came up with. They also came up with the community gardens. Stephen Fifita, who we also did a community video with, he is the founder and organizer of Family Peitaha, which is a Tongan organization for youth. And a lot of the youth gather at his home. They learn Tongan dances, they learn the language, they hang out together. And they also have the garden in his yard. So he's teaching the kids how to garden, how to grow the foods from Tonga. And when you talk to him, he really has this sense of what it means. He's reviving the knowledge that his grandfather had about gardening. He wants to embody that idea that his grandfather grew these foods and then he shared them with the community. Right? So he gives the food to his kids and they go out and they share it with the neighbors. Right? And they bring everyone in. So it's drawing on these ideas that we've talked about before, but in a way that brings the whole community in and offers them healthier options for food. Now, what's nice about the community garden that Stephen Fifita has done is that they are collaborating with Ainahau, right, and started a Hawaiian garden. So his garden in Santa Ana is providing the seeds for the garden. It's in Long Beach, right, a Hawaiian garden in Long Beach, right, and this is the way that they're growing and they're sharing the food and the knowledge and being able, again, to access all those things that we've talked about that have been thwarted in different ways.
So, let's see, we're almost to the end, and talking about sharing foods, I think that's a great thing that we're going to be doing pretty soon. And I just wanted to be able to tie some of these pieces in, so you kind of see when you are going out and working with the community, and you're working with the children within the community, that you understand what the Native Hawaiian diet is. So if you were to, let's say, put together a brochure or a pamphlet for the community, what are some kind of foods do you think that you would put in the brochure if you were to educate someone on the Native Hawaiian diet or the Pacific Island diet? Can you think of some things? Okay, oh, that's good. Somebody's listening. That's good. But, so you see more of the traditional health foods, like would you put in Spam, or would you, no, right? So I'm glad that, I mean, when we first started discussing this, all of you said what foods did you identify with that were mostly Native Hawaiian, and the only hand that raised up was they said Spam, and then now you're laughing. I think it's fantastic. So actually you're becoming more aware, culturally sensitive, culturally aware of it. And so I think that's it. And then some of the other things that we learned about, that if you were to put together something for a family or give them a recommendation, would you do it more of a, do you think individual-based or family-based? Family-based, that's right. So you do something surrounding the family, helping the mothers and the grandparents all together. And then what are some of the barriers that you learned about to keep in mind? I think this is something that many communities face. So what are some of the barriers that you saw that might inhibit in terms of maybe healthful cooking or cooking healthful foods? What are some things that you saw in there?
Availability of the traditional foods.
Access, that's right. Availability of the traditional foods, that's right. Access to food. And then what else did you see? So let's just not talk about food. Let's talk about these other more macro, with the more social context. About the video, we talked about that. So availability of the foods, but what are some other more social issues, political and economic issues that might affect what they purchase for their children, what they purchase for their families? So what are some things that came up in the video?
Lots of land, so they can't grow their own food.
Lots of land, they can't grow their own food. And then